A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kim Hae-mi. I'll be taking you through today's program. I'd like to thank you for attending the 2021 DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy. Thank you very much and welcome. As for this year's DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy, in order to comply with the COVID-19 related guidelines, we were only able to accommodate and invite only a small number of distinguished participants who are here on site. However, the entire forum will be streamed live on our official website as well as the forum's YouTube channel, and you can also watch the opening ceremony live on the KTV channel. Once again, I'd like to extend my warm welcome and gratitude to all of you who are here on site as well as those who are watching the forum online. The forum is co-hosted by the NRC, KIEP, and Gangwon province, and this has been prepared by the Ministry of Unification, Goseong County, and the Research Institute for Gangwon. And here at this forum, we're going to discuss the role of the international community and Korea to promote lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. We will also be able to strengthen the networks with various global institutions and organizations to strengthen peace resilience and promote international cooperation on the Korean Peninsula. Let us now begin the opening ceremony of the 2021 DMZ International Forum. First, I'd like to invite Chairman Chung Hae-gu of NRC for his opening remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Chung Hae-gu, Chairman of the National Research Council for Economics, Humanities and Social Sciences. The 2021 DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy is co-hosted by NRC, KIEP, and Gangwon Province. I wish to thank all of you and welcome you to the forum. I would like to express my gratitude to Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum and Vice Governor Choi Bok-soo of Gangwon Province for their congratulatory messages. I would also like to thank Minister Lee In-young of the Ministry of Unification for his keynote speech. I would also like to express my deep appreciation to Her Excellency Catherine Stevens, former U.S. Ambassador to Korea, Chairman Andrei Bystrisky of the Vandai Discussion Club in Russia, and many other foreign and domestic participants who are joining us either on-site or online. Rarely found in any other parts of the world, the DMZ, or the Demilitarized Zone, is a term that clearly illustrates the pains of the war and division on the Korean Peninsula. The DMZ was first established to maintain the status of armistice, but it has become a symbol of military confrontation between the two Koreas. The very fact that we still have the DMZ after 7 decades of the war means that the Korean War is technically not over yet. And this means that in this context, the DMZ peace economy expresses our desire to formally end the Korean War and pursue co-prosperity of the Korean Peninsula based on peace. And it is also our hope for peace and joint prosperity in Northeast Asia, based on peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. Some may say that our desires and expectations for the DMZ peace economy are not realistic. But I would like to argue that this idea can be compared to the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, which was designed to promote peace between France and Germany and peace in Europe after World War II. This initiative later evolved into EEC and finally to the European Union. And this process was able to bring peace as well as economic prosperity in the entire European region. Then, the idea of turning the DMZ into an area for peace and ecology, managed jointly by the two Koreas, and promote mutual prosperity for the Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia is not completely unrealistic. Rather, I would like to argue that it is a historic mission that we all need to achieve. So, the DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy is an international forum aimed at carrying out this very important mission. The theme of this year's forum is building resilience for peace and international cooperation on the Korean Peninsula. Dialogue for Peace was advanced in the first half of President Moon's term, but it has been stalled ever since. We wish to revitalize this dialogue and promote international cooperation. So in this regard, I would like to ask for your kind support and advice. This year, KIEP and Gangwon province worked very hard, as well as Goseong County, to prepare for the forum. I'd like to thank President Kim Hong-jong and Governor Choi Moon-soon and Han Myung-jong, head of Goseong County, for their effort. Bordered at the DMZ, Gangwon province wishes to transform itself to a peace special zone and a special peace province. And in this regard, I'd like to thank the Research Institute for Gangwon for organizing the session on this topic. I would also like to thank all the presenters and panelists for attending the forum despite the COVID-19 related challenges. Thank you very much.
네, 정혜구 이사장님께서 멋진 개회사로 2020. I would like to thank Mr. Jung Hae-gu for his opening remarks. Thank you very much. Let us move on to the next order on the program, which is congratulatory remarks from our Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum. He has sent us a video.
존경하는 국민 여러분.
Fellow Koreans, Gangwon residents, distinguished guests from home and abroad, greetings. My deepest congratulations to you on the hosting of the 2021 DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy. This forum, hosted under the theme Building Resilience for Peace and International Cooperation on the Korean Peninsula, hosts many experts. My thanks go to Chairman Andriy Bistricky of the Valdai Discussion Club of Russia and President Kathleen Stevens Shim Eun-kyung of the Korea Economic Institute of America, President Wright E. Gropp of the Halle Institute for Economic Research, Germany, as well as other experts from home and abroad. Also to the Honorable ambassadors to Korea who have blessed this event with their presence, and also participants who are joining us both on and offline. My gratitude and welcome to all of you. The DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy is a unique event in that it provides a forum to discuss the peace economy and allows you to experience the DMZ firsthand. It strives to share with the world the pain of North-South division and find ways to bring about everlasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. This year is even more significant in several aspects. The international order surrounding the Korean Peninsula is ever-changing, and North-South exchange is at a standstill due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is disheartening to see that the peaceful spring that the Korean people hoped for and the international community supported has become less of a reality. In this vein, today's forum is all the more welcome. We need to renew our will to drive the peace process on the Korean Peninsula, despite the many challenges that we may face. The forum's venue, Goseong of Gangwon-do, is a symbolic place in that Gangwon-do is the only divided province in the world, reflecting the pain of North and South division. However, it is also symbolic in that it represents a virtuous cycle of peace and economy, as it is a hub of peaceful exchange and also is a pillar of the Mount Kumgang tourist tours. Although we may not be able to find complete peace on the peninsula overnight, there are things that North and South can do together. For instance, we have to start with issues of mutual interest such as healthcare to address COVID-19 and forestation to create a better environment for all of us. Such efforts will be a small step towards restoring peace, and this will open a wider door towards peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. It is my desire that the experts today gathered here will share with us their views and conduct various discussions which will bring about peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you once again, and congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the welcome remarks from the Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyung. Now, I'd like to invite Vice Governor Choi Bok-soo for Administrative Affairs of Gangwon Province for his congratulatory remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Choi Bok-soo, Vice Governor for Administrative Affairs of Gangwon Province. First of all, I'd like to ask for your kind understanding that Governor Choi Moon-soon was not able to attend the forum in person due to the other urgent engagement. It is very meaningful that the third DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy is held here once again in Gangwon Province. I'd like to express my gratitude to Chairman Chung Hae-go of NRC, as well as members of KIEP and the Research Institute for Gangwon for organizing this forum. I would also like to thank and welcome Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyung, who has sent us a video message, and Unification Minister Lee In-young, who will deliver his keynote speech here on site, as well as many other distinguished participants who are joining us either online or offline. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may know very well, Gangwon Province is the world's only divided province. The DMZ, as a symbol of division, has been in the middle of the province for the past 7 decades. As such, our province has suffered inter-Korean military tension and significant constraints on its economic development due to various regulations such as military regulations and forestry-related regulations. There is the Border Area Support Act to promote development in the border area, but there's not enough substantial support. So we have challenges in terms of economic development. So, in May 2018, and after the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, when there was a better mood between the two Koreas, we decided to change the name of the border region as the Peace Region. And ever since, we've been working for revitalization of the economy of the DMZ area. And as part of this effort, we're promoting the designation as a special economic zone and Gangwon Peace Special Self-Governing Province. The Peace Special Economic Zone is an initiative to create an inter-Korean economic community in Gangwon Province by developing the border area where mutual economic benefits for the two Koreans can be realized. And this can help facilitate inter-Korean economic exchanges. We wish to become a special self-governing province to be at the center of Korean Peninsula peace economy and gain a foothold into the northern region with a high level of self-governance and special status for the promotion of inter-Korean exchanges. However, there are many challenges in the process of legislations for these initiatives. So to overcome these challenges, we're working closely with the Ministry of Unification and other relevant government agencies to make this happen. I hope that the participants will provide us with new vision for a virtual cycle of peace on the Korean Peninsula and insights on the designation of the Special Economic Zone and the creation of the Special Self-Governing Province for Peace in Gangwon Province. And we will take your suggestions to heart and promote new visions and peace in the region. And I very much look forward to your insightful comments. Once again, congratulations on the hosting of the DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy. I wish all of you good health and success. Thank you very much.
네,
Thank you very much, Vice Governor Choi Bok-soo of Gangwon Province, for his message. Thank you very much for these wonderful remarks. Now, we are going to take a look at the PR video of the Gangwon Special Self-Governing Province.
네,
Thank you very much. I would like to once again ask for your support and interest in Gangwon Province, which is the only divided province in the world. We have with us on site many very special distinguished participants. Let me introduce the VIPs, including the ambassadors and members of the diplomatic corps from various embassies. First of all, His Excellency Francois Bongtang, Ambassador of Belgium to Korea. His Excellency Pekka Metso, the Finnish Ambassador to Korea. His Excellency Philip Anthony Turner, Ambassador of New Zealand, as well as Her Excellency Lomani Katarunak, Ambassador of Thailand to Korea. And we have many participants from the diplomatic corps of the embassies of Argentina, Australia, Canada, France, Pakistan, Singapore, South Africa, Ukraine, and the UK. And we have members of the NRC, including STEPI, KISTI, Korean Institute for National Unification, Korea Women's Development Institute, Korea Institute for Public Finance, KRIVET, and many other institutes. Thank you very much for your attendance. Let's move on to the next part of the program, where we will invite Minister Lee In-young of the Ministry of Unification for his keynote address. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the minister with a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, nice to meet you. I am Lee In-young, Minister of Unification of the ROK. We are gathered here at the northernmost point of Korea, the gateway to peace on the peninsula. Here, you are gathered at Goseong in Gangwon Province. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I would first like to congratulate you all on the hosting of the 2021 DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy. And I would like to take the opportunity to appreciate the efforts of Mr. Jung Hae-gu, Chairperson of NRC, as well as President Kim Heung-jong of KIEP, and Vice Governor Choi Bok-soo of the Gangwon Province. Thank you. Also, my thanks go to our Prime Minister, Kim Buk-yeom, as well as Governor of Goseong, Mr. Han Myung-jun. Thank you for being here. We also have President Ko Yoo-han of the Research Council on Unification Policy, as well as members representing the government, academia, and the press. Also, Mr. Jin Lee of the Woodrow Wilson Center of Korea, and also Mr. Alexander Zhevin of the Russia Far East Research Institute. Thank you for coming the long way to be here with us. We have many renowned scholars from the US, China, Russia, and Japan who are joining us with us online. So I'd like to appreciate all of you for your presence. My deep appreciation also goes to the members of the diplomatic corps, as well as distinguished guests from home and abroad for being here with us today. I welcome all of you. Now, this forum is being hosted under the theme of building resilience for peace and international cooperation for the Korean Peninsula. And I hope that we will be able to discuss issues constructively for bringing about peace on the peninsula. ladies and gentlemen, the political environment surrounding the peninsula is quite volatile. And the dialogue between the North-South and also with the U.S. is at a standstill. But there are also shifts that may enable us to bring about a new order of peace. Starting from the second part of this year, Kim Jong-un, through his speech to the Supreme People's Assembly, has sent concrete messages to not only South Korea but also to the U.S. There have been quite frequent messages towards the U.S. and Korea, but there have been positive commentary about Seoul's proposal to an end-of-war declaration. And also, we have seen changes such as the reconnection of the North-South communication lines as of October 4th. And twice a day, we have maintained stable communication regularly with North Korea. Amidst the situation, of course, North Korea is conducting short-range missile tests. But the so-called moratorium has been in place since April of 2018. And I believe that the possibility of North Korea resorting to highly intense measures such as nuclear tests and long-range missiles seems very bleak. And I believe that this kind of situation will continue for the time being. Therefore, I believe that there will not be any situation where the situation between the U.S., Korea, and the North will lead to catastrophe, and that the situation around the peninsula will probably not be as uncertain as we had hoped. And also, the U.S. and Korea have continued our close cooperation to continue dialogue and engagement with North Korea. The Biden administration, its North Korean policy is based on coordination, practical diplomatic measures, and I believe that they have also opened their doors to a dialogue towards denuclearization, and they have sent clear messages that they have no hostile intentions to North Korea. And I believe that this was made possible thanks to the policy coordination between the U.S. and the ROK, including the summit talks that we had last May. In this situation, if unconditional dialogue is possible, then just as we made the Singapore dialogue and other such ties, I believe that we will be able to make a speedy approach to resolve the peninsula issue through practical and rational processes. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the months leading up to early next year will be very pivotal in deciding the situation and direction of the Korean Peninsula. And depending on how we view this time, I believe that we can build a new future for the Korean Peninsula. The Korean government during this time will do our efforts to keep the door open to dialogue and cooperation and reduce confrontation and discord to maintain the momentum for peace. First of all, we will push for an end-of-war declaration to put an end to the abnormal armistice and galvanize the dialogue with North Korea towards denuclearization. The end-of-war declaration needs no dramatic cost or large legal or institutional changes, but it provides a framework for peace and allows the North, South, and the U.S. to put aside their animosity and engage in practical and rational dialogue through peace. It also weakens the rationale and motive for military tension based on a nuclear program. And also, it will create a huge change in peace and economic development in and around the DMZ. This end-of-war declaration also fits the needs of North Korea because it has called for South Korea to withdraw hostile policies. And I think that it will be a good starting point for North Korea also. Through this declaration, we will be able to share a political consensus of non-hostility, which will lead to building trust, on which we can start to actually discuss issues of mutual interest. Currently, the US and Korea are in their final stages of negotiating this declaration, so I look forward to good news in the near future. Second, through comprehensive humanitarian cooperation, the Korean government aims to continue to build a community of life and security on the peninsula. Now, the Korean government and the international community have maintained that humanitarian cooperation towards North Korea should be pursued regardless of political, military, security situation. But we are also seeing new rules of the game being created because of the COVID-19 pandemic and also climate change. The North and South not only share an environment, but we also share the same fate in the face of pandemics, such as malaria, ASF, and AI. And we have seen this in the past. Also, the North and South share a same climate, ecosystem, and share the same sphere of living. And therefore, to protect the lives and security of our people from climate change and calamities, we need to cooperate with each other. Now, in July, North Korea submitted its voluntary national review to the UN and has showed its willingness and interest to maintaining sustainability. And so I believe that there is a lot of room for cooperation, not only between the North and South, but also with the international community. And we are open to dialogue and cooperation with North Korea on any other issue, whenever, wherever, and in whatever format. In other words, we are completely ready to restore our dialogue with North Korea. Now, the DMZ is not far from here, and it's meaningful that we are here discussing issues of coexistence with North Korea. And I hope that in the future we will be able to expand our dialogue on areas such as forestation, renewable energy issues, and also ways to achieve net zero. Third, the North and South will continue to implement the September 19th military agreement and expand peace in and around the border. The government will continue with this measure with great will. As you are well aware, through the September 19th agreement of 2018, we provided a practical foundation to reduce the threat of war. And overall, we have upheld the agreements. And during the past 3 years, we have seen very few clashes, military clashes around the border. And to a 1.2 million residents around the border, they have been able to feel the actual benefits of this peace. We removed some of the patrol posts around the DMZ, and we also demilitarized the Panmunjom JSA. Also, we created a path of peace of DMZ, and we opened that road, that trail to the general public so that they would be able to feel peace on the Korean Peninsula. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that trail was momentarily closed off, but it opened its doors once again on November 20th, and from 30th of November, visits to Panmunjom will also be opened as well. And we will continue with such efforts to expand such spaces of peace. I hope that many people around the world will come to this area, also to the DMZ and to the Peace Trail in DMZ, so that you may feel for yourselves what it is like. In this process, the South Korean government will continue to respect all of the agreements we have with North Korea, including our commitment towards a peaceful use of the DMZ. No one should be given the rationale to enhance the military tension that we experienced in 2017, and I believe that we should not go back or retract the peace that we have created in and around the DMZ. Now, ladies and gentlemen, based on all of these efforts, we are pursuing the 3 pillars of denuclearization and creating a peace process and bringing about development between the North and South. And we will be pursuing these 3 pillars together so that we will be able to create peace and prosperity. And this is the guiding principle and direction of the peace process of the Korean Peninsula. I also believe that we need new concepts of peace-built growth, peace-led growth, and a development based on peace as well. One of the ways to do this is to pursue the Peace New Deal. And this Peace New Deal focuses on the 3 areas of the Korean New Deal. That is the Digital New Deal, the Green New Deal, and the Human New Deal, and taking this and expanding this throughout the Korean Peninsula. To be more concrete, what we wish to do is to make sure that there are new drivers of growth throughout the Korean Peninsula, focused on areas such as manufacturing, services, infrastructure, and systems, and this will bring about prosperity between the 2 Koreas. Now, very recently, just last month, I met with Mr. Jim Rogers, the global investor, and he shared with me his view that the Korean Peninsula will see a boom in areas of tourism and logistics, and he was sure in his view that the North and South will become a prosperous country in the 21st century. Now, if we are able to bring firm peace on the peninsula, and if the residents of North and South are able to travel between the 2 Koreas, and if there is mutual economic growth, I believe that we will be able to do away with the old ways of conflict and division and move to a virtuous cycle of peace and economic development. And this will be able to bring about an irreversible and mutually dependent cooperation. I think that this Peace New Deal and the peace economy will benefit not only the 2 Korea, but also it will create a new model, a new order of peace and cooperation throughout Northeast Asia, the ASEAN, and Eurasia. And Korea, once it has removed the remnants of the Cold War, will become a bridge linking both the continent and the maritime territory, and will become a hub of Northeast Asia and Eurasia, bringing about a order of mutual prosperity. This happened in Europe through the EU, and they have become a community that is sharing peace and prosperity. Also, the ASEAN, by including the communist Vietnam, is seeing an annual growth of 3 to 7% each year and is building a regional inclusivity and connectivity. And this is a sure step forward towards development, towards growth, and I believe that the world needs to move forward. We need permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula in order for Eurasia and to become a stage of future peace. And I believe that the Korean Peninsula can be a new stage that brings about this change. The Korean Peninsula needs to move forward towards mutual coexistence and prosperity by doing away with its armistice of the past 68 years. And in this process, the peace of one country will bring about the joint prosperity of its neighbors, and the neighbors will bring about the growth of Korea. And this will also lead to the growth and benefit of all countries by providing a new model of coexistence based on respect and engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, in this post-corona era, many people expect that the barriers of politics, military confrontation, and material barriers will become obsolete. And because the world is moving toward principles of solidarity and cooperation, I believe it's very important that we bring about a new normal in our inter-Korean relations around the DMZ. I think that the DMZ, which has been heavily militarized through now, can move away from being a space of confrontation and Cold War towards a space of peace. Through the DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy, I hope that you will be able to spread the common understanding towards a peaceful Korea. And in the future, I would like to ask for you to continue with your support towards the Peninsula and the DMZ, and thank you for your support and listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Lee. He emphasized the importance of building a new future and promoting coexistence and prosperity between the two Koreas and creating a virtuous cycle of peace and economic development and the possibility of expanding peace order and on the Korean Peninsula through the Peace New Deal. Thank you very much for his insightful comments. Once again, a big round of applause to the Minister. Thank you very much. We're having the DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy held here in Gangwon province, which is the only divided province in the world. But once again, we are renewing our commitment to the peace process on the Korean Peninsula despite many challenges. This is the end of the opening ceremony. We will now begin the plenary session. Before we begin the plenary session, we will have to arrange the stage. And in the meantime, please enjoy the short introductory video. Now, let us begin the plenary session. We're still under the COVID-19 pandemic, and there is a spread of the variants of COVID-19. So given this global pandemic situation, we have invited overseas participants online. So they're joining us online. In this plenary session, we're going to be discussing how to build resilience for peace and international cooperation on the Korean Peninsula. International orders are changing rapidly, and we have higher barriers due to COVID-19. But despite these challenges, we wish to find a way forward for peace and prosperity. The plenary session will be moderated by President Kim Hung-jong of the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, which is a co-organizer of this forum. Now, I'd like to invite President Kim Hung-jong on the stage. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
그럼 지금부터
So I would like to invite President Kim Hung-jong. I will hand the mic over to him. The floor is yours, President Kim Hung-jong. Let's give him another big round of applause. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I will be the moderator for the plenary session. As was introduced, I am Kim Hung-jong, President of KIEP. Before we start, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the participants for being with us both on and offline despite the COVID pandemic and the various circumstances that you are in. Thank you very much. In 2019, we initiated a vision of a peaceful Korean Peninsula under the slogan of Peace is Economy. That's when we first launched the DMZ International Forum, and this year we are already celebrating our 3rd anniversary. We created a dialogue towards peace on the Korean Peninsula, and I hope that this will lead to a momentum towards peace and prosperity in Korea. This year also marks the 30th year of us becoming members of the UN. And 3 decades ago, we committed to playing a role in bringing about peace on the peninsula. Nonetheless, we are still seeing confrontations, and there are still tensions that we have around us. And so we have members representing various countries of think tanks, and they will be discussing issues of bringing about peace, policies to cooperate in the future, and there will be various discussions on related issues. So with that, I would like to start the plenary session. The first speaker represents the Valdai Discussion Club, which is a very renowned club of Russia. And we have Chairman Andrei Bystrisky. He is currently also the Dean of Communication and Media at the Russian University. And in last October, I was able to take part in the Valdai Club meeting. I met with him personally back then, and I recall good memories of talking with him. Let us hear from him. He has sent us a video.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation to such an important and high-profile conference. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic and its consequences have prevented me from participation in person. Alas, the pandemic not only disrupted my plans, it has affected all events across the globe. I would not say it has brought us anything new, anything that the world has never seen before. But it has definitely catalyzed many budding trends, and above all, negative, destructive trends, while weakening some of the positive ones. This is the most important effect of COVID. It has weakened humanity and global solidarity. Not a single conflict that began before the pandemic has ended. Rather, they are heating up. New ones are flaring up too. Moreover, we can see new fault lines emerging everywhere. Tensions are growing in Europe, even between the European Union members. Eastern European countries are fighting with Western Europe. The controversy in the Asia-Pacific region persists. US-China relations are deteriorating. The state of affairs in Africa seems very alarming. In the center of Eurasia, the situation in Afghanistan has become aggravated, with no viable ways of resolving it yet. Perhaps people are becoming fatigued and neurotic because of the pandemic, and that strain is taking its toll. Or it could be that the world order is simply collapsing faster. The trend has intensified. True, acknowledging conflicts is important, but I think it is much more important to be able to see a bigger shared problem that is hidden behind those fault lines. The problem is the growing threat of plummeting international security level, humanity losing its ability to respond to global challenges constructively and in solidarity. One would believe the COVID pandemic should have rallied the world close together. Forgetting all their momentary disputes, countries would make a vigorous effort to establish effective interaction, and create institutions and mechanisms for coordination action, distributing vaccines, introducing common rules for all, and making life easier for all people around the world. But we can see nothing of the kind. Political motivations dominate global affairs, and many of the world's elite are extremely selfish. The need to address climate change is a very indicative matter. Everyone seemed to agree that it was a real threat. Still, the decision-making process is too slow, mostly hindered by the players' inability of unwillingness to actually rally for decisive action. Dear colleagues, I strongly believe that our most important task today is to develop effective mechanisms for global interaction. No country can solve this problem alone. I would say my country, Russia, is trying to propose fair and honest rules of conduct on the world stage. Alas, the atmosphere of suspicion is spoiling the entire system of international relations. It's very difficult to deal with. But since the risks are extremely high for the whole humanity, we have no other choice but to continue trying to reach agreement. I think the people of Korea know from experience how difficult it is, but it's never as dark as before dawn. In conclusion, I would like to once again thank you for the invitation to take part in such a prestigious meeting. I wish the conference constructive work. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you to the chairman for his remarks. Not only in Korea, but also many countries are in a similar situation, and he touched upon this. Also, the ways to address the COVID pandemic and the actions of the elite around the world. Now, I'd like to move on to the next keynote speech that will be delivered by Ms. Kathleen Stevens, who is the president of the Korea Economic Institute of America and the chair of the Korea Society. From 2008 to 2011, she was also the U.S. ambassador to the ROK, and she is also the chair of the institute. And in Korea, she is well known as Shim Eun-kyung, which is her Korean name. She writes various commentaries in various media, and it's very meaningful to be able to hear from her. Let us hear from her.
Hello.
Hello, Kim. 안녕하십니까. It is very good to see you even remotely, and I feel very honored to join you and all of your colleagues and guests at this DMZ International Forum. I well remember in years past when I was so honored and appreciated the opportunity to join in person with a very diverse and distinguished group of Korean international leaders and scholars in this forum. And even though I'm not there in person, I am here live. I'm in California. And it's meaningful to me to think that you are gathered in Gangwon-do, beautiful Gangwon-do, thinking though of its tragic division and of the continuing need to seek peace and reconciliation for the divided people of Gangwon-do and of all of Korea. And I have to say, President Kim and ladies and gentlemen there, as I join you today from the United States, it's evening here in California, and it's, if you'll indulge me, it's American Thanksgiving Day. And this is the first Thanksgiving Day that I have been able to reunite with my small American family because of the pandemic. We've been able to get together, given that we've made some progress forward. But it's made me think as I prepared for this gathering with you, and what is evening for me, about the very, very long division, not only of the Korean Peninsula, but of the some 10 million divided families of Korea, and of the some 100,000 Korean Americans who have family who they still do not have contact with in the north of Korea. And so I feel that this is a very urgent time for us, and will continue to be urgent, that we seek peace and reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. In that context, I appreciate that this conference is about building resilience. Certainly, the Korean people of both South and North have demonstrated extraordinary resilience over the past century. Though the paths of North and South have diverged since the tragic division of Korea in 1945 and the aftermath of the disastrous war that ended in ceasefire, not a permanent peace, as the Minister of Unification noted, both states have defied the odds. South Korea in achieving extraordinary success as an economic power, as a democracy, as a respected international player, not only in manufacturing ships and semiconductors, automobiles, and much more, but also, of course, as a cultural powerhouse and a respected and vital participant in addressing the world's many challenges, and as already noted, marking 30 years as a UN member and indeed leader. And North Korea, I would say its very survival has defied the predictions and steep odds that it would not last. And though that resilience and survival has come at great cost of extreme isolation, immense suffering of its own people, it has defied the expectations and norms of the 21st century in many ways, but sadly, with respect to nuclear proliferation, human rights, and much more. So this is urgent business before us. And I do believe that what is needed now is not only resilience, but persistence in our decades-long effort to address the unfinished business on the Korean Peninsula of denuclearization, of reconciliation, of a reduction in threats and a progress towards a lasting peace and towards new economic and human opportunities and protections for all Koreans. So, you know, I know a Korean proverb, there's a Korean proverb that says, if you fall down 7 times, you get up 8. We must continue to get up. And I am encouraged by the words of the Minister of Unification, the Prime Minister, and others who have spoken tonight. Here are a few of my thoughts, my simple thoughts on how we would do that, put simply, which I hope will inform the discussion in this conference and as we go forward. First, I believe that denuclearization and a peace process must go hand in hand. One cannot happen without the other. But at times they will move forward or backwards asymmetrically. Both will take time, but a step-by-step approach, I believe, is the only way to build peacefully confidence and trust. The United States, again, I think as the minister implied, has a special role to play, and I think that's understood in Washington, given our history on the Korean Peninsula and our strong and vital alliance with the Republic of Korea. But Korea and Koreans must be at the heart of the process. There will be stability and a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula only when Koreans have a voice, the voice, in their present and future. And I especially welcome this kind of this international gathering, which is now in its 3rd year, because I do think that lessons must be learned not only for past efforts in Korea, but also from international peace and non-proliferation efforts elsewhere, both for their successes and their failures, whether in Europe, Asia, or elsewhere. And we must look for ways of turning what now seem to be barriers, and we've had a lot of barriers over the past few years, into opportunities. I know that's easier said than done, but I hope that as we reshape our lives and our relationships in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we should double down on our efforts to engage with Pyongyang, with the DPRK, on public health, humanitarian, and economic recovery measures that are so badly needed, and which can help to create the atmosphere and the framework for a return to dialogue and some cooperation. So, as an American sitting here at the eve of American Thanksgiving Day and with the privilege of talking to you in Korea, we always think of what we're thankful for in the United States. I am personally, and I think as a nation, we are deeply thankful for the friendship, the ties that exist now between the United States and the people of Korea. We understand we have a responsibility going forward to play our role. I am certainly committed to working with you and my fellow Americans to play that in a constructive way. And again, I would put humans at the center of this. And remember that the tragedy of the division of Korea is still with us. We have tried much, we will keep trying, and we will find a way forward towards addressing the unfinished business on the Korean Peninsula of achieving a lasting peace and reconciliation. Thank you very much for allowing me to join this conversation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you very much from Her Excellency Stevens, and she talked about our efforts for peace on the Korean Peninsula, and she mentioned that our effort needs to be sustained, and we need to be persistent and consistent in pursuing peace on the Korean Peninsula. Now, in the middle of December, KIEP will have a special occasion for in-depth discussion on this topic, so I look forward to that as well. And let's move on to the third keynote presenter, which is Ezil Toe, Director of the International Forum for Peace and Understanding of the UK, and has been participating in the DMZ Forum and has shared with us his remarks and insights on peace on the Korean Peninsula. I'd like to invite him.
hello.
Good morning in South Korea, and it's quite late here in Oslo, in Norway. I'm not only a member of the International Forum for Understanding, I'm also the deputy leader of the Nobel Peace Prize Committee, and in that regards, I would very much like to thank the organizers for the forum of the DMZ Peace Economy. Ladies and gentlemen, sustained and peaceful resolution of the conflict on the Korean Peninsula is very much a work dependent on resilience and patience. As the South Korean Prime Minister Kim Jong-un's practical dialogue for peace has illustrated, the best way forward is to restore and to reinvest in the dialogue and the progress that has already been made, to build stone upon stone. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we must be honest, very many of the small steps that have been achieved have been suspended for a while. This does not mean that we will be unable to move ahead. On the contrary, I think that the current situation re-intensifies the focus on a bottom-up approach to peace. And I think that the Gangwon Peace Province is one of several possible venues where such bottom-up, step-by-step steps can be made. And of course, I'm here talking about the work towards a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. For this to happen, we will need further confidence-building measures. And I do believe that a focus on win-win cooperation in the economic field and also in terms of public health are promising venues for such cooperation. Let's keep in mind that despite the many political aspects currently dividing North and South Korea, the two countries share many important challenges. We have been discussing the pandemic. Much can be made to help alleviate the terrible effects of the pandemic, both in the South and particularly in North Korea. In terms of climate change, we saw at the COP26 Global Summit in Glasgow, which I was honored to attend, it is still possible despite the geopolitical rivalries intensifying, as Professor Bisitsky very eloquently spoke about, there is still a scope and a possibility for humanity to share, to address our shared concerns. What we now need to do is to build effective mechanisms for cooperation and for dialogue. I cannot stress this enough. When we look at how entrenched conflicts in other parts of the world have been overcome, speaking to one another, even on a low level, even on unrelated issues not directly pertaining to the conflict, we see that this approach can create a degree of understanding that can allow for greater steps to be taken. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the time now is a time for creativity. As the Prime Minister spoke, there are challenges for both North and South Korea that has been forced upon the region due to the shifting geopolitical tensions in the world. This can be seen as a problem, but I do also think that the shifting sands also allow for new ways of looking at old challenges. And in this regard, I believe that the DMC, the peace economy, has the potential to be a game changer, a rallying cry, and a region where the North and the South can find discrete areas of mutual interest on which to build the first steps towards a process that will hopefully lead to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and also in the future, if all goes well, towards integration along the lines that the esteemed president of the DMC mentioned in his opening remarks, that we have seen in Europe a previously war-torn region that is currently characterized by cooperation and by peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you again for the honor of being invited to participate in this forum. And it only pains me that I cannot be with you in person in your beautiful country. And I trust that once this pandemic abates, we will all be able to meet each other in person and exchange our ideas face to face. Thank you so much.
네, 감사합니다.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Director. He is also a member of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, and he has provided us with very detailed proposals towards denuclearization, which should be done on trust. And he also proposed ways for win-win strategies towards cooperation in areas such as healthcare and also climate change, and how North and South can find ways to move forward by focusing on mutual areas of interest. Thank you very much. Now we'd like to move on to the next speaker, who is Mr. Steve Kilelea, who is the founder and executive chairman of the Institute for Economics and Peace.
It's now your turn, and it's your floors. Please.
It's very good to be here, and I feel quite honoured. I wish I could be there in person, but alas, the Australian borders are closed, so it's difficult to get out of the country. Reunification of North and South Korea would have a great benefit for the families of Korea and the people of Korea, as well as improving the cultural integrity of the two countries, which really, when you look back, has many thousands of years of history. But I'd like to talk to you more about the economics. And the economics of reintegration make really good sense. So we'll just go up and think about it globally. If we look at the cost, the economic benefit of peace to the global economy, would have been about $15 trillion in 2020. And so or about 11.6% of the global GDP. And so another way of looking at it, that is the actual economic cost of violence to the global economy. And I don't think anyone can really think about a world which is 100% peaceful. But it's all within the grasp of everyone here to imagine a world which is 10% more peaceful. And that comes with massive economic benefit. So we look at that, that's the equivalent of adding 3 new economies to the world, roughly the size of Ireland, Switzerland and Denmark. But to put it in another way, we looked at all the overseas developmental aid in 2020. That would be equivalent to just 1% of the cost of violence to the global economy. Now, if we come down and we start to look at North Korea, the cost of violence to its economy is about 27%. And it's got the 6th highest expense in the world. If we compare that to South Korea, it's at about 6%. And we can see a big difference there, and part of it is because of the economic differences between the countries. If you look at North Korea, most of that expense actually goes on the military. But if we just look at the economies, the difference in the economies between the two, South Korea's got roughly 2 people for every 1 in North Korea. Yet its economy is 40 times larger, at roughly 1.6 trillion compared to 40 billion in North Korea. Now, if you can imagine those 2 economies coming together, then we can imagine they got to roughly the same size. What that would do is it create an economy, something like about 2.4 trillion. And that'd be one of the 10 largest economies in the world. So the Korean Peninsula has that kind of potential within its grasp. Admittedly, it's a big leap, but it's something which I think we all can imagine. Now, the bigger question is, we can all understand the benefits of peace, both from a humanitarian perspective and an economics perspective, but what actually creates peace? And how does that relationship come back and intertwine with an economy? So what I'd like to talk to you about is the concept of positive peace, the attitude, institutions, structures which create and sustain peaceful societies. Now, the Institute for Economics and Peace, we developed the Global Peace Index. We've got about another 50,000 different data sets. We do a lot of economic modelling and statistical analysis to understand the qualities which are most associated with highly peaceful societies, and that's what we call positive peace. But now, when we look at those same qualities which create peace, they also create a lot of other things we think are important, like higher per capita income, better performance on measures of ecology, better performance on measures of well-being and happiness, better performance on measures of development. So therefore, in many ways, positive peace can describe an optimal environment for human potential to flourish. Now, just to bring that back home in just a little bit more detail. So if we take countries which are improving in positive peace compared to countries which are deteriorating, the countries improving in the last 16 years have had 2% per annum higher GDP growth rates. If we look at interest rates and inflation rates, we find in high positive peace countries, they're much lower. In fact, if we look at inflation rates, they're 16 times less volatile. We also find that foreign direct investment is twice as high in countries with high positive peace compared to low positive peace. We also find that sovereign bonds tend to improve if the economy keeps improving in countries which are improving in positive peace, where they tend to deteriorate in countries which are deteriorating. So again, it's back to being able to describe an optimal environment for human potential to flourish. These countries which are high in positive peace are also a lot more resilient. They can absorb a lot more shocks. They also perform a lot better on the ecology. So we went to the other end. The countries with the lowest positive peace have some of the worst ecological degradation in the world for a whole range of reasons. So let's have a look at South Korea. How's South Korea and North Korea performing on positive peace? So South Korea has done exceptionally well. In the last decade, its measures have improved 11.8%. That's the 8th largest improvement in the world. So something is going right. It's also now ranked 23 on the Positive Peace Index, which is a sign of over time it'll probably improve in peace. Now, if we look at North Korea, on the other hand, there's been no change in its positive peace over the last decade, and it's ranked 115th in the world in terms of its measures. So in many ways, if we come back and we look at positive peace, again, I'll come back, it's a mechanism for which not only to create peace, not only to create better GDP growth, more prosperous economies, it's also as important in a whole range of other things. And as my last point, I just really want to come back and stress the systemic nature of positive peace. So when we look at these, look at the issue of building actually peace and more flourishing societies, it's not a matter of focusing on one thing or another thing. And those things will differ from society to society. It's the integration of many things, because when a society gets moving in the right direction, what you find, it creates a virtuous cycle, one which is self-reinforcing in the way which it operates. And so I think on that note, I'll stop. But certainly the economic integration makes great sense for both North Korea and South Korea. And I wish you every success with your conference, and that hopefully next year I can be there in person. Thank you for asking me to attend.
Thank you very much, Chairman Kilrea, for your speech. And thank you very much once again. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Thomas Goma, President, Director of the IFRI. IFRI is the French Institute for International Studies, and one of the outstanding institutions in France. Yes, I'd like to invite Mr. Thomas Goma. Yeah.
Good evening or good morning, depending on what you are sitting. It's my real pleasure to contribute to this new conference organized by KIEP, which is a very long-standing, friendly organization for IFRI. So thank you for having me today. I hope that in the future we will be able once again to really meet, but that's our situation at the time being. So I was asked to give a few words about the relation between the US and China, and also about the situation in a post-COVID world. Two observations. I don't think we are still in a post-COVID world. Seated in Europe, we are facing the so-called fifth wave. So the level of vaccination is very high in France, but it's not the same proportion everywhere in Europe. So we risk to suffer from this new wave, even if its future consequences should be more limited than the previous ones. But it's just to say that we are still in the COVID crisis, and consequently all the strategic situation, depends on that. The second observation is about the relation between the US and China, which is obviously the main topic when you are working on international relations. I don't know if it's really a conflict or if it's more a stiff or a very strong competition, but for sure the relation is much more difficult, much more tensed. Recently we had at the COP26 some discussion in parallel between China and the US on climate. We had also a conference, a video conference between Presidents Xi and Biden. So there are some links, and that's a strong necessity given the level of interdependency between China and the US, and the impact of this interdependency, not only on East Asia, on the Korean Peninsula, but also in Europe, and I would say everywhere to some extent, given the importance of this strong relationship between China and the US. Now, if I try to characterize this relation, I would like to make the following observation. I think that everywhere in Asia, in Europe, in the US, in Africa, we are facing a convergence between two trends, which are namely the environmental degradation with the climate change, with the loss of biodiversity, and with the problem of global pollutions. So that's the first trend. And the second trend, it is the propagation, the dissemination of technology. And that's the landscape, I think, on which we should try to think about the relation between the US and China, but more broadly to think about the future or the evolving relations between the different actors on the international scene. Regarding China and the US, in my opinion, both countries at the time being subordinate their their respective climate policies and their respective digital policies to their strategic rivalry. And that's maybe the biggest difference with the EU and European countries. For these countries, climate change should be dealt, through multilateralism. And it's a question for all the countries, but we have more and more the feeling in Europe that the US and China, because of their rivalry, because of their strong competition, thinks it's more important to take the lead on the other than to some extent to resolve the situation. That leads me to a reminder which is very important for Korea, for European countries and for others. China plus the US represent more than 40% of global emission. Second, if you add China and the US, it's more than $1,000 billion of military spendings a year. And obviously, that's the two most important economies in the world. So just these three figures remind the centrality of the relation between the US and China and its consequences, as I said previously, everywhere in the world. So I do hope that next year we will be able to continue this discussion in presence, and I wish you the best for the continuation of this conference. Look forward to meeting with you. Bye.
네, 감사합니다. 토마고마 소장.
Yes, thank you very much for your remarks. Now, the global economy is facing various issues and challenges, and he touched upon some of them, especially the rivalry between the major powers. And in this US-China rivalry, I think that we feel a lot of frustration, but despite that, we need to push forward with peace economy here on Korea. And we were able to feel his views on this. Thank you so much. We would like to move on to the next speaker. who is Mr. Mohan Kumar, chairman of the RIS of India. Now, RIS has a special relationship with KIEP because it is our Indian counterpart. And so I'd like to invite Chairman Kumar. It's a great honor to be with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be addressing you virtually. As you rightly said, RIS and KIEP go back a long time, and it's a great honor and a privilege to participate in this conference. I think I'll begin by saying that complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, peace in the Korean Peninsula, these are outcomes that every peace-living citizen anywhere in the world would welcome. So that's a no-brainer. I mean, this is something that we all want. This is something that we all seek. I propose to situate the Korean issue, if you like, in the larger context of the Indo-Pacific, because it is the Indo-Pacific that is the theater of great importance. That is where the future of international order is being built. It is also the region which will likely contribute the largest share to the global economy, the population. So it's got a lot of things going for it. Unfortunately, the Indo-Pacific is also the theater where there are the largest number of issues. So you can talk of South China Sea, East China Sea, the Korean issue, the Himalayas issue, the Taiwan Straits. So this is the dichotomy that we are seeing in the Indo-Pacific. On the one hand, it holds tremendous potential, and I dare say, and I will repeat, the future of international order is being crafted and built in Indo-Pacific. On the other hand, we see that some of the biggest friction points in the world are also located in the Indo-Pacific. This will have a profound influence on the Korean Peninsula, whether we like it or not. And therefore, an understanding of what is happening in the Indo-Pacific, in my view, is crucial in terms of also trying to address the Korean issue. Now, what can powers like Korea, maybe even India, but other powers do about this? The first, I think, variable, if you like, which I think was alluded to by other speakers, including the previous speaker, is the US-China relationship. The US-China relationship is important, and the way the US-China relationship plays out in the Indo-Pacific will be of great significance to all powers in the Indo-Pacific. Without trying to apportion blame, I would say that China's actions in Indo-Pacific will have great import, because that will invoke an equal and opposite reaction from other powers. We've seen AUKUS, we have seen Quad, we have seen other minilaterals, and therefore you have a hub and spoke system developing in the Indo-Pacific. Almost all of it, I would argue, and I speak under correction, it is in reaction to Chinese action. So that's the first thing that we have to keep in mind. The second thing that I would say is Indo-Pacific has to be multipolar. It cannot be unipolar. It cannot be just a few powers deciding, or even one power deciding what is going to happen in Indo-Pacific. There is simply, it comprises so many powers which are varied, which have different interests. So the only way in which Indo-Pacific can be a dynamic region is if it is multipolar. That's the first requirement in my view. The second, it's got to be open, it's got to be free. Most of all, every power engaged in Indo-Pacific will have to be committed to peaceful resolution of disputes. You cannot change things or change the status quo unilaterally, even if it is incremental. You cannot, because frankly, that will lead to enormous tension. So the status quo has to be maintained, but I'm not saying the status quo needs to remain forever, especially with regard to the Korean Peninsula. Things have to change, but they have to change by mutual consent after negotiations between all the stakeholders. That is extremely important. A unilateral change of status quo will invoke tensions, will elicit a reaction from other powers, which will disturb the balance in Indo-Pacific. In terms of how this can be done, I think it is obvious if you're talking about complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, it needs to be done in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions. If you are going to talk about how to keep the sea lanes of communication open and free, you have to look to UNCLOS, the United Nations Law of the Sea. It has to be in accordance with the UNSC, the UN, the UNCLOS, as we say. There cannot be a unilateral interpretation of how things can be done in Indo-Pacific. So a reliance on the UN Security Council and the United Nations Law of the Sea would be extremely helpful if peace is to be maintained in this important theater. South Korea, in my view, is a glorious example of what peace can achieve in a country which has got a strong-willed government and a disciplined people. This is the combination that we want in a post-pandemic world. Not only is the state back in a big way, so we can all bid goodbye to the Washington consensus. There is already talk of a Cornwall consensus, which means the state is back in a big way in post-pandemic era. The state has to play a role. It has to deliver health services. It has to deliver education, especially in countries like India. The state is back. The state needs to be efficient. And as I said, I look to South Korea as an example of what a strong-willed state can do. But then you also need a population which is disciplined. I am not suggesting that individual liberties and freedoms be set aside, but the collective discipline of a population such as South Korea is worthy of emulation. I speak at least from an Indian perspective. I cannot speak for my Western counterparts. I think it's not as if individual liberty can just be at the expense of many other things. That can be for things like wearing a mask. That can be for things like getting vaccinated. Not because you believe in individual liberty, because you care for others. And you are not safe until everyone is safe. And that is what I mean by discipline. I also believe that as we craft the future international order in Indo-Pacific, there needs to be a new compact, a new concert. The US-China conversation is important. And I think all powers, whether they are small like India, a bigger power like Korea, but other powers like UK, Australia, France, etc., have to play a part. But the Republic of Korea can play an important role because it's got relations with both US and China. I believe Korea can act as a bridge and it can persuade both countries. I mean, India is part of the quadrilateral dialogue, and we try to do what we can to keep the sea lanes of communication in the Indo-Pacific free, open, and a rules-based order. But if that is not acceptable to others, I think there needs to be a conversation with the other side. I believe Korea is supremely well placed to carry out such a dialogue. And I think Korea must play a much bigger role internationally in the Indo-Pacific than it has played hitherto. I think it has to punch above its weight if the region of Indo-Pacific is to remain peaceful, if it is to remain open, free, if it is to be based on rules, and if it is to contribute to the dynamism of the global economy. I'll stop here, but that was my intervention because I do believe you need to situate the Korean issue in the larger context of the Indo-Pacific in order to understand the dynamics of geostrategic politics as it unfolds in our region. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
네, 모항쿠마르 원장님.
Thank you very much. He was very passionate in his remarks about the situations on the Korean Peninsula as well as in the Indo-Pacific. And so he shared his views on the Indo-Pacific and the status of Korea and many countries in this region. And recently, there have been some global issues that have panned out in the Indo-Pacific, and he shared his comments on what we can do. So once again, thank you very much for his intervention. And last but not least, I'm going to invite Professor Rodrigo Frank from the University of Vienna. He is an expert on research on North Korea. So since the 1980s, he has been very active in conducting research on North Korea and the Korean Peninsula. But he's not only done research, but also has visited both Koreas many times. And since 1980s, he has studied Korean language. So it really shows that he's been very involved in and engaged in the Korean Peninsula issues. So I am very honored to have Professor Frank.
Thank you very much for the sharing time with us. And then I'd like to invite you to the speech. And yeah, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me a chance to share some of my thoughts as a scholar who indeed has been following events on the Korean Peninsula and who's been trying to make sense of what's happening in North Korea for the past 30 years. I hope you can see, no, it doesn't seem like you can see my, yes, you can see my presentation. Thank you very much. In fact, 30 years ago, I have been, on that day actually, I have been in Pyongyang, as you mentioned, as a language student at Kim Il-sung University. And already at that time, I could observe that North Korea has been in the middle of a deep economic crisis. Now, looking at the situation right now, unfortunately, this hasn't really changed. We are aware, of course, of the short-term crisis caused by COVID. We know about the midterm effects of economic sanctions, but I would argue that the actual real problem that is underlying everything else is really the long-term structural crisis that North Korea has been in for a long, long time. And this crisis is not being dealt with by a reform. As we can observe by studying North Korea, looking at recent developments, the recent speeches by the leader and all policies that we also learn about from North Korea, they actually show at rather conservative policies, import substitution, strengthening of the role of the state, which again is a problem because they do not address the root causes of the currently very, very difficult economic situation in North Korea, which would be actual systemic reforms. This is not to say that North Korea has not been changing. As everybody who has been following this for a longer time, you are aware of many, many attempts to make the economy work, starting in the 1960s already, going through the most recent measures in agriculture or in industry. But according to a definition that you would apply to reforms, as you have it also here on the slide, I'm following Janos Korna here, a very prominent scholar of socialism, in fact. We can say that North Korea has had perfection measures, but no actual reforms in the sense of really being broad enough, deep enough, and touching the key elements of the system. But these reforms are needed to resolve all these issues around North Korea, speaking of weapons of mass destruction, human rights issue, humanitarian suffering. So the question I think we're all facing is how can external actors actually promote reforms in North Korea? Many things have been tried. You see a list here. It's not exhaustive, but I suppose you will recognize the one or the other. The problem I see here is, first of all, they obviously haven't really worked because North Korea still is not reformed. And I think one of the reasons is that many of these measures have not been aimed at achieving reforms. They were aimed at many other very reasonable goals like denuclearization. Some of them were aimed at regime change, but not at reforms. And let me say that the reformed North Korea doesn't really necessarily mean a change of regime. It could be the consequence, but doesn't have to be. So I think we need a way to break down this question of how to improve the likelihood of reform in North Korea, a way to break it down into more manageable sections, because what we've been doing so far is just asking how can we reform North Korea? And I think this question just cannot be answered because it's too complex. Now, don't worry, this looks actually more complicated than it is. It's actually very, very simple. This equation more or less says that reform depends on support for reform and opposition to reform. And if support is bigger, then it's more likely to happen and vice versa. And that support for reform depends on the number of supporters, but also their relative power within the system. So you can have a large number of people who support reform, but if they have no power, they don't really matter very much, and vice versa. And whether you are a supporter or a non-supporter of reform depends on how you as a North Korean perceive your own gains and losses from reform or from non-reform. That leads to 8 variables that I've just repeated here. It's more or less the same equation as that was on the previous slide. Supporters and non-supporters in terms of number and relative power, and then the perceived effects, not the actual effects, but what matters is what people think is happening or going to happen, resulting from these reforms, gains and losses from reforms and non-reforms. In addition, I like to look at North Korean society in a more differentiated way, rather than treating it as one. We need to break it down into groups. I propose 4, but you can actually choose other groups. That doesn't really matter that much. I chose the leader, the elite, the middle class. Maybe you can divide middle class in old and new middle class, and the people, which moves from one North Korea and the question how it can be reformed to actually 32 single issues, which to me as a scholar, I think is a perfect way of having a discussion, because you can, of course, agree over the single answers, and I'm sure that we all will, but at least you will get closer to actually finally asking the right questions. This is, I'm jumping ahead here, that's the aggregate result of the application of this model to the actual situation in North Korea. Let me just choose one example, because I think it has also implicitly been touched a little bit today. I do, for example, not believe that it will be very easy to convince the leader that he is going to gain a lot from reforms, which is why I'm a big fan of summit meetings, but we should also be aware that they are not the most effective way of achieving progress. The green fields here are the ones that seem to make much more sense, actually. And if you look at the balance, you see the main results of the model emerging here, and I think this is very significant. You see that whatever we do, from diplomacy to sanctions to capacity building, even propaganda, should be aimed at the elite and the middle class, and it should be aimed at altering their perceived gains from reforms and their perceived losses from non-reform. And on a side note, as you also see here on that slide, the same model can, by the way, also be used to make more sense of the actual behavior of the North Korean leadership right now, of reform opponents, like how they try to prevent reforms from happening. My last 2 slides are on what that actually means in terms of specific measures, because we're in Korea and I'm always asked to provide some specific policy recommendations. I think some of them are pretty obvious. Promote the successful cases of China and Vietnam when dealing with the elite, and help the elite to understand that they actually benefit from reforms through, for example, more tax revenue, more budget to spend for state agencies, and yeah, let's face it, also more chances for them personally to extract rents. I think we should also be aware that many members of the North Korean elite are worried about losing their power, or worse, they have followed the example of what happened in Eastern Europe very closely, and they were not very happy to see what happened to their peers over there. But they should, of course, also be aware that there have been other examples, like, again, in former socialist countries in Eastern Europe, but mainly also in China and Vietnam, where former elite remained elite and even were able to upgrade their position. For South Korea, that would include my recommendation to clarify in a legally binding form, for example, in the law passed in the National Assembly, what will happen to former members of the North Korean elite after a potential unification. Because I'm pretty sure they will easily learn about that. But they, they need to know what's the plan for them. What's the plan for North Korea's generals or Central Committee members after unification? For sanctions, which is always the big pink elephant in the room when we talk about North Korea policy, I understand where they come from. I understand the standards of sanctions. But as I said before, I believe that the goal of sanctions maybe could be adjusted to make them more efficient and more effective, rather than focusing directly on denuclearization, which is of course always the big goal. I would use sanctions to help North Korea to liberalize and marketize its economy, and also sanctions relief, of course, for improving the legal framework for investors, increasing North Korean compliance with international standards, for example, on money laundering, etc. And why not demanding free travel for all North Korean citizens? If you think this is naive, then I say yes, of course it is, but it's much more realistic than demanding that tomorrow they give up all their nuclear weapons that they build up with this huge financial effort that my colleague has just been referring to a few minutes ago. For the middle class, I think the same points apply. We should perhaps, in terms of capacity building, the governor mentioned Gangwon province reaching out to North Korea, trying to engage in cooperation. I strongly support that because it will help the North Koreans, it will enable them to make better use of new opportunities emerging from reforms, and that will make them reform supporters. And last but not least, I think it's also helpful to inform the North Korean people that much of what they see in terms of their everyday suffering is actually related to the absence of reform, and I think that will also help creating the necessary pressure within the North Korean system so that reforms might be promoted. I think I will stop here, but not without thanking you very much for the time to share these thoughts. There is my email address in case you like the presentation or papers I've written about this. I'm very happy to send them to you. But for now, this is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Frank, for your very interesting analysis on North Korea, the attitude towards the reform, and then you break down the North Korean society into four, and a very interesting analysis on the every class's response against the or towards the reform, and that is very interesting analysis, I think. Now we just finished the speeches from the 7 speakers, and then I'm very happy to be with you, and then especially the Catherine, Ambassador Catherine Stevens, and then Mr. Ezra Toye, and also the Chairman Steve Claire, and the President Mohan Kumar, and the Ridigo Frank for your sharing your insight and wisdom with us here in Goseong, Gangwon-do. And then before finishing this session, I'd like to kind of share my views on this how to build up the economy, peace economy in the Korean Peninsula. And then I'd like to share with you that I think that this area, Northeast Asia, is could be the one of the dynamic economies in the world, but that is not true now. And then if you think of the areas Far East Russia and also the northern part of the China, and of course North Korea, all of these areas are underdeveloped. So I think that these areas has a great potential for the further development, and this economic development is directly linked to the peacekeeping in this area, not only in just these areas, but also the Indo-Pacific, as Mohan Kumar, President, argued, and also not only these areas, but also the Europe and the world as well. And also, it could be a very good tool for us to understand how to tackle the strategic competition between the two giants of the United States and China. So all of these kind of things show us that how important it is for us. Us means not only for Koreans, but also the people who are joining us today. That we need to have honest effort to continue to drive the peace momentum to this Korean Peninsula. So I hope all of you just keep being interested in this issue, the Korean Peninsula, how to secure the peace and prosperity in this peninsula. Even if we have some kind of the adversities or sometimes backward, regress, but we can continue on this kind of effort. And then I hope that all of you just share our ideas and then our intention and our efforts and with you. Okay, thank you very much once again for your joining us. And also especially special thanks to the two speakers who were, I think, very late at night, but happily join us. I really want, yes, Mr. Toye, and then Professor Frank. And then I really hope that next year we will have 2022 International Forum on Peace and Economy. DMZ International Forum. We will continue. So I hope the next time you all come together to Seoul and to talk about these issues in person, not just like the internet or something like that. Okay, and then thank you very much once again for joining us, and then thank you very much for the participants in this conference hall, and then I hope you have a very good health and then good luck. Thank you very much. Thank you. 감사합니다.
네.
Thank you very much. We are still having many challenges, but we were fortunate enough to have a wonderful panel of experts. I would also like to thank President Kim Hung-jong of KIEP for moderating this panel session. And I would also like to thank all the participants and attending us via online. So with this, we would like to conclude the plenary session as well as the opening ceremony of the DMZ International Forum on the Peace Economy. Starting from 2 p.m. this afternoon, there will be 3 parallel sessions co-organized by KIEP and the Research Institute for Gangwon. So please enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you back in the afternoon. Thank you.